Hello, my friend. Welcome to the show that is the Butterfly Effect podcast. I'm Jack, and I'm here as always with Liam.
Hello?
And today is our final chapter analysis of the Quarry. I can't believe that we are here. Titled Bricks and Mortar. So, without further ado, I will throw it over to you, mate, because
Yeah,
you're going to be leading this on the most part. So it starts with Max, I believe.
it did for me. So obviously, as we know, Chapter 10 is so varied based off of who survived and who died. Like, I guess some people don't even get a Chapter 10 because no one actually has plot armor in Chapter 10, and I guess you can have a game over at Chapter 9. But if you weren't that unfortunate, and if you're like me, at this point, as a reminder, the only person I've got killed so far, counselor-wise, is Abby. So I managed to get to Chapter 9. So I got a Max scene, which you didn't get, Jack, did you?
I didn't know because I got Laura killed. Obviously, her and Travis mutually killed one another, and Ryan died. I didn't get this scene at all. So, yeah, take
Yeah,
it away, mate.
interesting. I mean, not too much happens, and it probably has quite an underwhelming ending, which is um, a reoccurring theme, which I'll say throughout this chapter, I'm sure. But basically, yeah, you wake up in a tree. It's pretty funny. It's a comedic intro, actually. It's nice to see Max. Like, I knew it would happen at some point because it's said throughout that there was 9 counselors you could play as, and Max was the 9th. So I knew you would play as him at some point. Admittedly, I thought it might be chapter 7, but it's all the way in chapter 10, and it's like whether you can get there. He wakes up in a tree. He's covered in blood because obviously I killed Chris, so his lineage stopped. So he came back to a human. And yeah, he falls out the tree, and then of course Emma stole the bag of clothes from earlier, which I never really thought about how they were just there for Max. So it was really funny because you see him walk down the treehouse and he's there in Laura's clothes. So he's got like these like leggings on and like a pink hoodie and a pink hat, and you walk around as Max on the island with these girls' clothes on, and it's quite a funny scene. And hats off to Scaligazondo, he acts it very well. Essentially, you're just exploring a little bit. You're really confused, as you would be if you just transformed back from human form and you don't know where you are or what you're doing. But you're left with an option, which is: do you swim to shore or do you stay where you are? Now, I was just cautious. I decided to stay put. I have later read that this could actually kill Max if you swim, because I think Caleb's on the other side. I've not quite seen it yet, but apparently it's a 50-50 choice and Max can die. Now, whether I agree with this, I'm unsure, because it's like you play as Max briefly for 5 seconds. Very reminiscent of maybe like the Jess and Matt scene in Until Dawn, where it's just like, oh yeah, let's revisit a character and just give them a 50-50 choice to possibly kill them off. Felt a little cheap, a little underwhelmed by Max's whole presence in the game, because this is kind of like the last I saw of him. I am aware you can get a conclusion with him if Laura's alive, where they can reunite. I think Ryan and Travis have to die though. So I never got this. I just got Ryan stayed on an island and that was it for him. I know a lot of people really rated Max's character. I just felt one of the many characters who got shafted. He needed way more time, way more playability. So yeah, Jack, from someone who never got that ending, I mean, what's your reaction to all of that?
Yeah, so obviously, regardless of how underwhelming it is, it still would have been nice to have that. And you know what? I finished my blind playthrough, and then I was seeing online that you could play as Max in chapter 10. I was thinking, what sort of thing? How on earth did you get that? But I suppose before I go further, I'll just say that obviously, yeah, I didn't have this in my initial playthrough, but since I have done multiple playthroughs, the first thing for me is that I just love the quote that it starts off with. He's like,
why am I on top of a fucking tree?
it made me laugh. And obviously, yeah, he gets changed into Emma's clothes, doesn't he? And
Yeah.
interesting as well, because if Emma, I don't know if you know this, mate, but if Emma gets killed by Max in werewolf form in chapter 4, he can climb down the ladder and see Emma's dead body on the floor. And he can like approach her. I think he picks up her phone or something. And I think he just like mumbles something to himself. But I thought that was like, in terms of a continuity, I thought that was a nice touch. The fact that you could sort of see Emma there.
Definitely. And I think it is important as well to touch on the fact that we're going to talk very much about our blind playthroughs here. I know a few things that can happen in chapter 10 variety wise, but if I'm criticizing chapter 10, I am well aware that there are other endings that exist. So, but yeah, that's cool that, you know, a lot of people could have potentially had that ending if Emma died. Yeah, that's really interesting. A bit like when Emily finds Matt's shoes in Until Dawn if he falls down the cliff. I quite like a few Easter eggs like that if, you know, you get certain paths that meet up that way.
Yeah, and then as far as the choice goes, it does suck that it's a bit 50-50. I suppose, though, at this point, the player has been given enough information that werewolves don't like water. I mean, admittedly, it's still a bit far-fetched that as soon as he climbs up onto the pier, the damn werewolf's there to kill him. But, you know, having said that, it has been said quite often that as long as you're on the island, the werewolves are not going to get you via water. So it is wise to stay, and you did stay, didn't you?
I did, and I almost regretted it because I was wondering, like, oh, what if Max needed to be on the island to, like, actually save? Because I just was thinking I need to keep him safe. You stay on the island, there's so much stuff going on. But then I thought, oh, what if it's, like, you know, like the game's flare gun or, you know, firework, where it's actually, like, Max as a secret weapon? And I was a bit like, oh, I might regret that later. So I was living a little bit on edge in the other scenes, thinking that, oh, maybe I needed Max in certain elements. And he'd be like the knight in shining armor, and I've just ruined that weapon. But nonetheless, it turns out it was the right choice, and I just 50-50, heads or tails, and I got it right. So yeah, that's the first. Because it's rare I do that, if you look at Emily's shot and Abby's death. So it was nice that I finally got a 50-50 right. I'll take that as a win.
Yeah. Yeah, so mate, unless you've got any more points, did we want to move on to Caitlin and Dylan at the lodge?
Yep.
So yeah, this bit for me as well. You know, because obviously you start the cutscene, they're coming through the door, and one of the first thing that Caitlin says is, we need to get to a vantage point. Very smart, Caitlin. You know, she's still showing that she can have a level head in the situation that they're in. And this is an opportunity for you to explore the lodge, and like, this is where I kick myself, really, because I went up the stairs. I didn't actually stay downstairs. I went up the stairs, and there's the little queue next to the chimney where you can hit A, and then I think it comes up, keep looking, or prepare for attack. And for some reason, which I cannot explain, because in other points of the game I would hit continue exploring, I hit prepare for attack. So the clues that I missed, and there's actually a bit of evidence as well in this chapter, I just completely missed them, and that considerably cut down my playing time as well. But it was nice to go back when I did future playthroughs and to actually think, wow, actually that this lodge is a lot bigger. You can explore. You've got whole other levels to it. And obviously when you have the showdown, you can like go outside the window or go across the beam. So yeah, a little bit again underwhelming in my first playthrough, this particular bit. But what about you, mate?
So yeah, that is really frustrating for you, mate, I must say. And it's funny because it worked out the opposite way. Because for me, you know, as I told you in chapter 1, when you can walk around the lodge as Jacob, I picked up the bags and I didn't get to explore the lodge. I talked to Dylan and Nick in there. So now when I was back in the lodge, I saw it as a second chance. So the moment I got to that choice, I was like, nah, I'm exploring. And I was really thorough. If you watch my gameplay, I'm sorry in advance, because it's probably a 20-minute section of me scouring every corner. When it came to clues, I very much sucked in the first half, and I really picked up my game in the second. So I was very meticulous. You know, I found like the High Priestess card, the trail cam footage evidence you're on about, a load of other stuff from a chalkboard doodle, an ancestral portrait, inscribed jewellery, a camp letter, and Bobby's dog tags. So yeah, just really thorough. And I was wondering as well if maybe like you could find weapons, or, you know, maybe silver around, just to really fight off this this wolf. And I must take the time to mention as well, you know what, I really like Dylan and Caitlin's dynamic. You kind of see it a lot at the scrapyard scene in chapter 9. But it's kind of refreshing to hate on Ryan again here, but to see the dynamic away from Ryan. They're almost like the little rejection club, aren't they? But you've got Dylan's jokes when he's like, "Oh, we should have been swimming in the water all night," and Caitlin's like, "Die of hypothermia." And then they do like the joke where Caitlin starts singing like the Hackett's like theme or like the camp theme, and then Dylan's just kind of humming along or saying the end words, and Caitlin scolds him for never having learnt the words. And I don't know, these two, there's a reason they're in my top 3, to be honest. I really like their dynamic, and yeah, maybe neither of them need Ryan. I think they're good the way they are.
Yeah, it's a good point, because it would have been very easy to make these two hate one another, wouldn't it?
I agree, yeah.
Which you never really get throughout the game. It would have been easy to have them hate one another and then maybe come to some sort of, more like a platonic relationship towards the end of the game.
A bit like Nick and Eric in House of Ashes, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Nick's just hating on Eric. I'm like, mate, at the end of the day, they don't even know you're the mistress, mate. Like, you've got no right to be angry at Eric. You're literally making this girl cheat for you.
Yeah, and it's you sort of get to the end game, and obviously these two are put together, and you look at them, and you're like, yeah, guys, like, why are you both bothered about this Ryan guy? Like, he's not that great, so I wouldn't spend too long worrying about him. But no, completely agreed on their dynamic, mate.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of this, it gets to the bit where the ground starts shaking, and something's coming. But I guess for you, it progressed right to the bit where something breaks through the chimney, right? But I actually had some scenes in between.
Not straight away. I think I did cut to Emma.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I cut to her. To be honest, not that much happens. All she is doing is watching via the CCTV. And she's like, oh, I don't know how I can help. And then that's pretty much it. Then it cut back to Caitlin, but I know you've got like a Jacob scene, haven't you?
Yeah, so like a little bit before Emma, you get a Jacob scene, and it's very underwhelming again. Now I know that Jacob can die at like 8 different points, to the point where you most likely get Jacob killed at this point. It's almost as if the game thinks, oh, he won't even be alive at this point, let's just write something. And oh my god, I was so underwhelmed by this ending. Now, essentially for me, he's crying in the woods, and he's just there like, his shirt's off, and he's just there like, oh, I wish I could tell you I'm sorry. Then he's hating himself, saying, oh, stop crying, you big baby. And then he's just going, I don't know what to do, almost like Josh Washington style, where he's almost breaking down. And he kind of just sits down and kind of, buries his head in his hands almost, crying in the forest. And I'm thinking like, okay, cool, like that's Jacob, and we're going to see more of him because he's in the forest now. And he's probably going to tee himself up for some redemption story, because he's like, he feels like he's like hooked up with Emma. Maybe he's going to go in there, try and be a knight in shining armor. But spoiler alert, he just doesn't. That was his ending. I was waiting for him to come in and save, but that was his ending. He just cried in a forest. And I didn't find out to the conclusion bit where it tells you the status of them, whether they're deceased or alive. I don't know about you, but like, I don't know, like, I just feel cheated because, and I'm going to be saying this a lot, Jack, but I did quite well with the people I kept alive. I did well with the QTEs and the choices. I had a lot of characters here survive, but I was so underwhelmed with a lot of the endings. And a common theme we will obviously be saying is that you need infections to make the endings interesting. You need infections to put any sort of spice into the ending of the games. Now, I didn't, but only because I did good choices and, I succeeded like most of the QTEs. And I just feel cheated that I did well out of my game, but I got an underwhelming product with so many of these characters, and Jacob's certainly one of them. His ending was crying in a forest for me. Now, I don't know your reaction to that. Obviously, you never got this Jacob scene. But maybe it's the same as Max, where you kind of think, well, at least, there was an ending for him. But yeah, I don't know, mate. Just, I'm dead underwhelmed with Jacob here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously from like a blind playthrough trying to save them all sense, it sucked that I got him killed. But from what you're saying, it didn't sound like I missed much. And you know what? It was something like, you know what you were saying earlier on about you need very specific choices to get endings that are satisfying. It's almost as if, you know, Jacob escaping out to the forest, you almost needed Emma to then meet him in the forest, so that would have required her to have got infected, which, to be fair, we were saying before in our Quarry rankings, weren't we, that it's almost designed that Emma has to get infected, so then that would have then neatly worked out. So,
and then Jacob can get infected as well, which can create some good endings as well. But I just never had that because no one got infected because I did the QTEs right. And I think now's a really good time as well, actually. And I know it's sort of jumping ahead a little bit, but we might as well talk about Nick as well, mate, because he's someone else as well, right? Who can wake up in the forest. And, you know, while we're talking about underwhelming endings, now Nick, for me, I mean, did Nick survive for you, mate?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So same here. So as we know, the moment he jumps out the pool house window, whether he kills Abby or not, he just gets locked up by the Hacketts. Whether you free him or not, which, well, you know, I think Laura has to hit the switches, or she doesn't, I can't remember. But he just wakes up in human form, and he plays no part in, you know, the lodge fight at the end, you know, the Silas scene. He does nothing. He's just put on the bench. More than anyone, at least Jacob can say he got a scene where he got to cry in a forest. Nick didn't even get that. There's a reason we put him 9th on our list, right? And for me, I feel like Nick gets shafted more than anyone. I feel like so many characters do, whether it's Max, Jacob, or Emma, Abby as well to an extent. But Nick just gets it the worst. It's almost like they forgot he existed, to be honest, after, like, you know, like the Hackett House scenes. I don't know what your thoughts are on Nick's endgame, mate.
Yeah, so you know what I mean, same as you, underwhelming. The fact it's, you know, does he get shot or not? But as you were speaking then, Jacob goes out into the woods, Nick wakes up in the woods. You could have had a scene where them two met up again, and considering that there is like a subtle rivalry between them two, isn't there? You think of the sort of the target practice with the gun, and, you know, obviously if you're half good at the game, you know, it's very forgiving with the shotgun shells and stuff. You're probably going to hit the targets and make Nick win that. And obviously he's up against Jacob. And then, of course, Nick kisses the girl that Jacob likes. So there's like a rivalry there that they could have brought back into the story. Maybe there could have been like a resolution where they sort of come to sort of like, I don't know, a mutual respect for one another, or like they sort of forget the things that happened before. The events of the night were so dramatic that it pales in comparison.
Mate, I completely agreed, and that's such an amazing point. Like, they completely missed the trick there. And I feel like, you know, we often compare this game to Until Dawn, because why not? It's like the predecessor. But, you know, you've got Jess and Matt, who are like sort of two sideline characters. Whether you find the scene underwhelming or not, at least they gave them a conclusion. Now you can say the same for like maybe Max or Jacob, or, you know, I don't know, like a few others. But at least they got something, you know. Nick doesn't even get that, and you could have easily have given him just a mini scene, even if it's like what Max had, like a 50-50 choice. Get Jacob and Nick to meet up, maybe some form of danger happens, I don't know. And then, you know, they get a choice, and maybe it can result in death, maybe it can result in a resolution. Yeah, certainly missed a trick that I would have really loved to see that, mate. It's a really fantastic idea.
It would have been more satisfying, wouldn't it? And I think,
it would have.
You know, at least you then you sort of pay homage to the character that you've created in Nick, because it's he's literally thrown by the wayside. So it's such a shame. And of course, you know, better still, just to add on to that, you could have had an ending where him, Jacob, and Emma meet up in the woods. Do you know what I mean? Like post the kiss, and that would have been an interesting dynamic. Obviously, you know, you need very specific choices to get there. But having said that, I think that would have been a good thing as well. So, yeah, it's a shame that it's going to be a common theme with this, but there we go. Shall we move on?
Yeah, I'm happy to go back to Caitlin. I mean, it's the chimney scene, right? So this is like the wolf showdown, isn't it? I love the oil painting bursting, and then you've got the wolf's head that goes through it.
Yeah.
What the?
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, so with this bit for me, I suppose I'll come back to something I said in one of the earlier chapters, which was a nice little observation that paid off for me. I mentioned about the chimney, didn't I? There was like the blueprint, and I think there was something else as well that said that, you know, that the chimney needs renovating, but they don't have the money. And I was
I think
thinking,
when you inspect it, it's Jacob in chapter 1, I think.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I was thinking, how does this chimney come into play? And then obviously when you see it on the wall, and then the ground and everything just starts shaking, I was thinking, this is where it's gonna come in. The werewolf's gonna burst through, and sure enough, it did. And it led to a sequence where, for me at least, it come up with a choice as Caitlin: you can run or you can wait. And then I ran. And then it led to the beam or the window, and I chose to go out the window because I felt that it was just a little bit dangerous to go balancing on a beam. I was thinking, especially with a werewolf, maybe the weight would fall down, and then Caitlin would get killed. So went out the window. Then it come up with another choice. I think it was like run or hide, and I still ran because I have the policy at this point that running is the best thing to do in this, as against hiding like it was for Until Dawn. And then obviously Emma, she's there because I found the silver shells in the basement in the previous chapter. She's like, "Oh, Caitlin, I've, come over here," and she rolls the silver shell under the door. She then loads it into the gun, and you then obviously get a combat encounter where you can shoot Caleb dead. And to be honest, the more I'm talking about it, my chapter 10 was shit. the fact that you then just shoot it dead, and that was it. Literally, that was it. And I was thinking, since I've done other playthroughs, I have done the beam walk thing, and I much prefer if you don't get the silver shells and you go into like the kitchen and the freezer. You get like a don't breathe segment. You get the choice whether to throw the toy in the freezer, and then you've got to like shut the door. Nowhere near as good as Until Dawn, but it was certainly better than just shooting it, which obviously you had the opportunity to do with Ryan in the previous chapter. I don't know, I expected a little bit more of an elaborate death than just shooting it, personally. I don't know about you, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk you through my whole sequence as well, because it's actually like similarities to yours, but differences as well. We made a few different choices. So firstly, this is classed as a horror game, and there weren't really that many scary moments. The scariest point I could probably really say is, I guess it's a little creepy when Bobby's kind of going around the house, but because I didn't really fear the hillbillies, I wanted to talk to him. It really took the sting out of that for me. But the only other point I really found scary was where Silas was chasing him at the scrapyard and the lights were coming on. I really like that effect. But I really like the fact that the wolf burst through, and then like you hear like the stairs creaking, and you're kind of just stood there like, what do we do as this guitar music's going? And I just really like this horror effect here. But yeah, same as you, mate. I ran. I don't know what happens if you hide or stand your ground or whatever the option was. I'll mention as well that obviously this is where Emma is talking to the TV, and I just, again, Houston Sage's acting really good. I love that moment. And then it gets to the beam versus the window. Now I chose the beam. One thing I do want to say though, mate, is that when you jump out the window, does that dramatically change the game there? Because I imagine you would jump to the outside. So does the fight not take place inside anymore?
No, it does, because all that happens is I think you have a QTE as you go out the window. I don't know if that means you lose the gun or if the werewolf catches up with you. But all you do is walk along the roof and then go in through another window, and then it plays out to the point where you get the next run and hide choice. So probably not a lot.
Oh, right, okay, interesting. Now, obviously, this game has a lot of nods to horror films. You know, we've seen it with Friday the 13th, Sleepaway Camp, The Evil Dead. I'm wondering if jumping out the window is a nod to my favourite one, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because every Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the final girl jumps out the window to escape Leatherface. And I think this is a complete nod. I've literally just put 2 and 2 together here. Because I didn't know you could actually do that. But yeah, I just wonder if that was a Sally Hardesty moment. So that's something that's interesting. But either way, I went across the beam. Now, from this point, I just have to say it. This Caleb Wolf is a fucking dumbass. There's no way of sugarcoating it, Jack. You're just slowly walking along the beam, being really careful, of course, because why wouldn't you? You're trying to balance. But then the wolf, at the end of the day, is a fucking wolf. It should be going across the beam really fast, the way it just earlier managed to climb and catch Abby and no problem. Now it's like walking across slowly with you, like it's suddenly lost its balance and it's like learning to walk for the first time. I don't know, it just was so slow, and I just was thinking how dumb this was. Like, it was like slower than, like, I don't know, like the heavily sedated tigers you see in Thailand that the hippies pet and stuff. I just was like, what is going on? And then it fucking falls off halfway. I'm like, what is going on with this wolf? It just took all sting out of the horror element there for me, and I just didn't feel any pressure. And then I guess, yeah, obviously you get another choice to run or hide or whatever it was, because I got away, and I thought run again. I'm like, I'm not hiding. You mentioned it before. At this point, we know that running is always the best option. I mean, most of the time anyway. And at this point as well, the wolf vanishes. Emma's banging on the door going over here. And the wolf just doesn't do anything about it. You'd think it would run and be angry and maybe go in there to intercept. But Caitlin, she's not even in a massive hurry. She's just kind of half sneaking but going around. And I'm just like, why are you sneaking when Emma's making all the noise in the world? I don't know, just the writing here just seemed a little off to me. There was just so many plot holes with it. And then, out of nowhere, you turn back around after receiving the silver shells. And then Silas is at the door between, the kitchen and the front door anyway. I'm like, how's he ended up there? Has he just walked past all that noise that Emma was creating? I don't know about you, mate, but I thought this was flawed.
Right. I can definitely see how it's flawed in your one, because you went across the beam and the wolf fell. So the wolf should be on the bottom floor.
Yeah.
Where obviously you go to get the silver shell. With mine, because I went out the window, he was at least on one of the top floors. I mean, don't get me wrong, the pace of that thing, it should be back down there in no time. And like you say, Caitlin's going for a little wander to go and grab the silver shell. It still should have caught up to her. But yeah, that, from your perspective, mate, that makes absolutely no sense. Because she should have gone past the wolf to grab the shell, and yet it ended up... Yeah, I can't get my head around that.
Right, and you just you look at the consistencies, because there's a lot of inconsistencies with the game. We're talking about wolf transformations here. Why does Nick fall ill, react badly in the water, and for chapters and chapters he's getting more animalistic and chaotic? And why is it that Laura's just fit as a fiddle the whole game, even though she's been bitten, and then out of nowhere just bursts? Very inconsistent there. And you could look at the same for the behaviour and the nature of the wolves. You've got Max on the island who's jumping around after Emma, really quick and nimble, and jumping on the tree house, cutting her off and stuff. And then you've got this Caleb one who's just really sedated, slower than Ryan's voice, trying to walk across a beam and then falling down in Benny Hill style, with cartoon explosion. It's just what is going on? The inconsistencies are mad sometimes. But mate, same as you, I'm just going to get to the conclusion of it. Obviously, yeah, I investigated the silver bullets. I just shot Caleb dead on the spot. I just was I think maybe out of fear that the Nick and Abby sequence was going to happen for me again. I wasn't having Caitlin get jumped because I didn't shoot the wolf. So I just shot dead on the spot, and I'm aware of... I've not seen them, but I know about the freezer scenes that can happen. You get the don't breathe section. There's the thing with the teddy bear. There's all these different endings about how Caitlin can lock herself in the freezer with the wolf, how you can lock the wolf in there, and it kind of nods back to when Jacob was investigating earlier. And that would have been really cool. So I'm not saying that like this is the one ending and it's awful. There's other endings there that I never got, and it just sucks that I never got those endings because I just killed the wolf at the first opportunity I had. And I'm gonna jump to this point when we talk about the Silas bit, but there's some morality things there that I do want to discuss. But the whole thing's topped off though with another hilarious Dylan moment. Like I say, I much prefer him at the end of the game. Where he comes out with a frying pan, like that's gonna do anything.
Yeah.
That I didn't mind because it's just so Dylan. Like, love it.
I'll raise this one thing that I've spotted in like a future playthrough. So you've either gone out the window, you've been on the beam, and then you get a run and hide choice, don't you? And we both chose run.
Yeah.
I did a playthrough and I chose hide for that second bit, and I think Caitlin and Dylan went into this room where there was loads of bunk beds, and they both went to hide, and you then get a don't breathe sequence, and I'm convinced that I passed that sequence. You're gonna if anyone listening can correct me in the comments, please do so. But the exact same principle, I timed it so that the red bar was about to go out, the red had disappeared, and yet for some reason I think the wolf, maybe it's because in this particular playthrough she didn't have blood on her face, but it killed me, and I was thinking, what was the point of that QTE then? Because it didn't matter, she was always going to die if I chose to hide, which I thought was a bit weird. But like I said, if I'm wrong, do correct me, because I thought that was something that was a bit strange.
Really interesting, actually. Yeah, for sure. But regardless, though, in your first blind playthrough, we both had Dylan and Caitlin survive at this point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's really rewarding, because I know a load of people struggle to get these characters alive at this point. I think especially where there's this whole trophy to do with Caitlin being the final girl survivor. So I don't know if it is particularly difficult to make Caitlin survive, but nonetheless, it's nice to see that we had these two characters survive here, especially two that are in my top 3 favourites. So that was really nice. So interestingly for you, mate, the scene transitions from this one to Laura for me. How would that have happened for you? Did your game sort of like end towards this point? I mean, what happened to yourself?
It straight up ended. So I shot Caleb, and then you got a shot, like a camera shot of the lodge, and it just panned slowly to the moon, and then you could see like the daylight start to come through, and then that's when all the post-credit sort of stuff started to come up.
Oh, that's insane, obviously, because obviously for me, I get the Silas ending. I had Laura, Ryan, and Travis alive, so they're in a car, and I love how Laura's savage nature is still there. She's just absolutely shitting on Travis the whole time, saying things along the lines of, "Oh, some hunter you are." Like, "Oh, actually, what happened in the past is relevant." Going at each other's throats a little bit. I did the whole thing where, I was inquisitive. I grabbed the gun. I took cover. Now, obviously, as you told me as well, Jack, there are different endings here based on what you do. I managed to succeed all the QTEs. The really weird one where you can shelter your head from hitting the window, I think maybe my difficulty was too easy, but it just almost like had this weird slow-mo scene that I just didn't really rate. But then, I hit the brakes, the wolf went flying, and then I ran over it, which gave me a head start for when, I faced Silas later. I'm gonna, obviously rush through this. Then, as you're walking through the woods to try and find, Silas, you've got the whole, Eliza Volres backstory where you start learning about the Hag of Hackett's Quarry. And I know we mentioned that Eliza does get very shoehorned in towards the last 2 chapters of the game, and it is a little bit of an info dump here. Really cool to see the ending of the game. You learn about how Silas escaped and how the wolf infection spread from Kaylee wanting to free the wolf boy, feeling sorry it was locked up. They caused the arson as a distraction. Caleb got bit in the process, and this is how the infection started. And I thought it was really interesting. Yeah, and it also makes you feel that much kind of more maybe hatred and animosity towards Laura for killing supposedly Kaylee, who's supposed to be this really sweet, innocent girl, which is another thing we'll mention later. Another thing as well is that I just want to mention it. Our good friend Hidden Object Guru mentioned that Eliza Voorhees' name comes from Elias Voorhees, so there's another Friday the 13th reference there, which is cool. And I think we need to mention it again, don't we, mate? Why is it that Travis Hackett, who has spent 6 years looking for this wolf, cannot find it, and then the moment, you know, it's convenient and there's cameras and it's for the story, he's like, oh, why don't we, like, look here? And Silas is just there chilling in his bed. Like, we never think to look there ever, or is this just the first time Silas has gone back to his bed in 6 years? I don't know, he's just chilling there, like, I don't think, you know, Laura was that wrong when she said, oh, some hunter you are. The guy was just in his bed, and I get, admittedly, yeah, he was hit by a car and he needed somewhere to rest and heal. But yeah, I don't know, just, maybe I've missed the trick there, and if in the comments you can correct me, because I know I've been very cynical for the last 30 minutes here. But, yeah, I don't know, I just thought the game was just a little flawed in that sense. I don't know if you'd agree with me there, Jack.
I'll tell you what makes it worse, mate, is the fact that I'm pretty sure that Laura says to Travis, or Travis says to Laura, oh, wasn't this where we crashed 2 months ago? So, building on your point, it's basically saying that Travis, all of them characters, bar Ryan, they were in that area. Travis, who's been looking for the wolves in that area, clearly not doing a very good job, because a few feet from where they were interacting 2 months ago was where the wolf was based and where the wolf's been sitting. So, in short, yes, I do agree with your point that it's a bit flawed.
These Hacketts are the worst. They can't communicate when Bobby's walking around the house when all he has to do is say a few words. Jedediah and him just walking around all mysterious, not being informative whatsoever. And now you've got Travis here, who's just been looking in the wrong... You know, either he didn't think to look once in this circus bit, or he never really checked there that much. But yeah, it's just the Hackett family. I don't know what they're doing. But either way, it gets to this conclusion. Now, one thing I quite like here, it's interesting. For me, I just had a choice. Do you shoot Silas or not as the timer goes down? Now, very different to the Caitlin/Dylan scene we just saw. Now, there's almost two kind of boss endings, I guess. I think it would have been quite bad if you just made 2 fight scenes or 2 choice space. It was nice there was variety. One had an action sequence, as flawed as it was with, you know, Caleb being the way he was, as I mentioned. But this one was just a choice. Now, it was a moral choice, because in the previous chapter, I had Eliza there, like, do not kill my boy. You know, Silas is my son, he's innocent. You know, and I'm just like, oh my god, maybe there's a way to try and save Silas here. And then I've got Travis yelling at me like, shoot the wolf, you silly girl. And you know that thing we mentioned in the Until Dawn podcast about how there's an underlying theme of don't fuck with nature?
Yeah.
You know, you're not supposed to shoot the bird, you're not supposed to axe the elk, or, you know, kill the squirrel. And it's the same here, you know, you're like, oh, do I shoot the wolf? And it really throws a spanner in the works in your mind, and it's quite a difficult choice, because you've got this, like, grieving mother who's, like, been helping you for 9 chapters with these tarot cards, and she guilt trips you a little bit, like, oh, well, I've been helping you, haven't I? Come on, please help me back, he's an innocent boy. And I'm like, well, you're not kind of far wrong. And I'm kind of thinking, yeah, maybe I shouldn't just kill, like, you know, I did with Caleb. Because it's kind of a similar choice with Caleb and Silas, like, but this actually kind of almost, in a way, is a bit like, oh, you have to look out for yourself. You know, you're a human, you're against an actual monster, an actual beast here. And obviously, I never knew this at the time, but I shot Silas. So I was safe, but I didn't feel good about it. It cuts off to Eliza afterwards, absolutely screaming at me and attacking me. But yeah, I just was there, like, I killed Silas and I felt bad about it. But it turns out that if you don't kill Silas, he kills Ryan, Travis, and Laura in a pretty gruesome way, apparently. I know you've seen the scene. I haven't, Jack.
Yeah, so if you don't shoot, it's pretty good actually. Like he then just turns round, and just with a swipe of his paw, just completely decapitates Travis. Same again for Laura, and then I think he pushes Ryan down to the ground and rips his jaw out. So it's pretty darn graphic. But it's you've sort of touched on something that I was going to raise as well. This whole moral angle, because when you think about it, it is very dark. Because let's face it, when you put all the pieces together, two young boys are getting shot at the end of this game. You think Caleb, obviously, who's already been shot by Caitlin, and here you've got Silas, and no matter what you do, they either die, stay infected, like remain as wolves, or at least one of the other has to die. So it's I don't think any of them really get out of it, to be honest. As a last thought, it's quite it's quite disturbing.
It is a very dark ending, and there's no right answer, is there? Because I saved the group, but I didn't feel good about it. I've just killed this innocent dog who obviously Kaylee freed, and its mum died when it was younger, and it's just running out there basically by itself, probably scared. I don't feel good about the fact I killed Silas, mate. There's a point we mentioned in the last episode as well where I thought Silas could have been designed way better. I would have liked a nice, distinguished, different feature from the other wolves. I was promised this big white wolf that was quite significantly different. It would have been nice to have kind of really seen that, but he didn't look that different from the other wolves, if you ask me, really. But yeah, I will get to Eliza though. So I obviously had an Eliza scene where she's just yelling at me like, "Oh, I think you're clever." She's proper angry, laying into me like, "Oh, I started to like you after all this time I've been helping you." And she was just proper digging into me. Now, one half of me was like, well, you had a go at me for not finding your tarot card, so get fucked, bitch. But on the other hand, I was like, yeah, you've got this grieving mum who died in this really tragic circumstance of the circus, and now I've just gone out there and shot her son. I don't feel great about this. And I don't know if I'm haunted now, but she just said, oh, whenever you hear that scream or that voice in your ear, that's me. I'm going to be haunting you. So I know you didn't get this scene, Jack, but I've got Eliza that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life, apparently. So it might have been a good thing.
Yeah, I think I might wind you up when we meet up. I'll just sort of scream through the wall.
Yeah, I'm trying to find you, and then you're just there, whispering behind a dustbin, Silas.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, fucking hell. For me, it's that long ago. I can't actually remember, but I think she was just a lot more nicer to me, because in my playthrough, all of the Hacketts but Chris died, and obviously I never even got to the point where I got to see Silas, so I think she was quite chirpy.
Oh, that's so interesting, and I quite like that, with that me and you got a bit of variety there. I'm also wondering, mate, here's a question I've got. Now, I picked up a tarot in this chapter, but because I obviously killed her son, she's not going to exactly read it for me. I mean, quite rightly. If I was a psychic and someone just murdered my, son, I wouldn't, give them their fortune. They don't deserve that. So I don't know. Did she get to show you the High Priestess, mate?
I'm trying to think. No, I didn't even pick it up, mate. Because
of course not. Okay.
That's the one thing. When it comes to stats, so much I've missed from chapter 10. I think I've done pretty well. I think I got over 3/4 of everything. But so much was missing from chapter 10. The tarot card, clues, evidence, yeah, so no, I didn't get that at all.
Yeah, mine was very much the opposite. I flopped hard at the first few chapters, because for example, I didn't find Emma's bracelet on the floor. I just missed so many clues. Until by the end, I was walking around maps for half an hour finding nothing. I literally scoured every corner of the scrapyard. But yeah, then it comes to this, and yeah, but it's really interesting. I assume that if you don't kill Silas, and you pick up the High Priestess card, she'll read it for you. So it's interesting, possibly to get all the tarots and all the clues. I might be wrong here, correct me if I am, guys. But you have to actually side with Silas killing the cast, or maybe just not getting that scene, picking up the tarot, and then you can read it. And I wonder what the High Priestess card contains, because it's the final tarot of the game. And I wonder if there's maybe an Easter egg for another game, or just some cool conclusion. But it'll be nice to see what's in that premonition there. Great. So results, mate. So obviously for me, out of the 9 counselors, the only one I got killed was Abby. I still had Max, I still had Jacob, Nick, Emma, Ryan, Caitlin, Dylan, and Laura alive. How about yourself for the counsellors, mate?
So alive, I had Caitlin, Nick, Dylan, and Emma. Technically Max, but he was infected. So, use your own judgment on that, whether you view that as alive or dead or whatever. And then dead, it would be Abby, Jacob, Laura, and Ryan.
Okay, so yeah, kind of like a half-half thing there.
Yeah.
It's dead interesting, because like I mentioned, I think you really need infections to happen for the game to be interesting. I never had that, and yeah, I'm dead happy. I had 8 out of 9 counselors alive, but I'm underwhelmed by my blind playthrough ending. And in a nutshell, if I had to conclude this game, mate, I would say that I love that there's a lot of branches, more so than Until Dawn. There's so many different endings, but not all those endings are good. And yeah, that's just, I got one of those endings, even though I feel cheated because I did very well with my QTEs and my choices. I feel like if I was to get 8 out of 9 characters alive, I would have wanted more than what I got, if that makes sense.
Yes, we'll cover this in more detail in a future video, but the fact that it actually makes sense to get everyone infected to then get you to a point where you kill Silas and then they're all magically better makes no sense to me, because I didn't get anyone infected in this game apart from the ones that, default to get infected.
Yeah,
all of my deaths were as a result of combat encounter, or obviously the breaker thing for Jacob, and I can confidently say I did not fail a QTE in this game unless I purposely chose to fail it. And obviously you kept a lot of people alive, so on the one hand that's great, but then you've got a bad ending. With me, I've got less people alive. And wow, my chapter 10 was a massive flop. And it just comes back to that point that you have to do very specific things to get the endings that are naturally more satisfying, I suppose, is what
it might be one of these games where you really have to replay it to get the quality out of it to find the good ending. And if you were playing it on a one-time basis, you might get a quite unsatisfying game, like me and you potentially have. So yeah, I find that dead interesting. But mate, what did you make of the whole ending sequence there with the, in your case it was the Monkeys song, wasn't it?
Loved it. I absolutely loved it. I know I've come back to this point so many times in this series, the choice of music, but I don't know. I know it makes no sense, and I've seen this criticism a lot, because you get the Monkeys' Daydream Believer. I think if you use the streamer music, I can't remember what it's called, but you obviously don't get the Monkeys, you get something else. But both are quite jovial and, sort of high-spirited and happy music. And I really liked it, because not only was it a song that I recognise, but I think that because I had such a bad ending where people were dead, Max was stranded and he was infected, I'd lost half the cast essentially. But you've got this really happy music. It reminded me of our video, mate. The Happy Days one.
Yeah.
You've got this very, sort of upbeat music in the background, but the content that you're seeing is very dark. Like the juxtaposition doesn't make sense, And I don't know, it just made me laugh and it made me feel happy, which you could argue is not what you're supposed to feel at the end of a horror game. But I think as a whole, although this is billed as a horror game, I almost look at it's far more accessible to a wider audience, isn't it, this one, because of the lighter tones, especially in the earlier part of the game, whereas I think Until Dawn, it sets a mood from the get-go, and it's pretty consistent with that mood all the way out. Obviously, it gets worse as it goes on slightly, but me personally, I really liked it. I've got to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, it was mixed emotions, because obviously I will reiterate, it was at this point where I kind of found out that, oh, nothing's happened to Jacob, nothing's happened to Nick. That's what's happened to Max there, and Emma's just in the basement. So, like, I felt underwhelmed by 4 endings, to say the least there. But yeah, no, it was nice to see, I kept a load of Hackett's alive, such as Jedediah and Bobby, which I know is potentially quite difficult to do. But yeah, very dark, especially, mate, when you're looking at Caleb. You've just got this boy laid out on a table.
Yeah.
And Kaylee, who's just in a body bag in the Hackett house. And you've got this really happy music over, like, a child's dead body. I'm like, what is going on? But, yeah, like, very interesting. Obviously, I'm a little gutted I didn't get the Monkeys ending, because I went on the streamer version, because I didn't think that would... get flagged in the copyright, so I could have it on the main channel, but then we ended up putting it on the bonus. But it just meant that I never got that recognised tune. I got this other one, but it still worked well. I think I would have preferred your one, but nonetheless, yeah, it was a very interesting way to conclude the game. And then it's concluded on a different note with this the podcast ending, right? The final episode of the Bizarre Yet Bonafide podcast. What did you make of it, mate, as the reason they ended it that way?
If I would have accepted it, had it finished and then there was a cutscene, the fact that it ended with that, boy, did I feel underwhelmed. I was thinking, come on, give me a cutscene. Like I said to you earlier, I know that this would have been a lot of work on their part, because you'd have to create so many different ending cutscenes. I would have absolutely loved to have a cutscene where maybe, because Chris survived in my playthrough, he's still infected. Do you imagine he just wanders back to the lodge in like this bonus cutscene, and he runs into Dylan and Caitlin? Maybe a word doesn't even need to be said, but they're just staring at one another as if to say, wow, what has just gone down? And there's like this real sort of off atmosphere between them. Like I'd have really digged that. But the fact then just ends with like the credits and these 2 characters that I know they were great in the build up for the game, but I didn't really care for them too much in terms of the plot. I know that they're involved because of like the podcast interfering with what the Hacketts have got going on, but yeah, it's a bit, I think Until Dawn's was better with the police tapes, to be frank.
Yeah, like, very interesting, don't get me wrong. I was always wondering, why is the final episode of Bizarre Yet Bonafide not out yet? The game comes out on Friday, guys. I was there like, what's going on? And then I'm like, okay, so it's in the game as the credits. And like you say, I was expecting a cutscene at the end. Now, Until Dawn had Josh as a Wendigo, which is just such a cool horror-like ending. The amount of scenes we've seen where the happy ending happens and then you get one final jump scare, whether Jace jumps through the pier and grabs the teen, or like, off the boat or whatever. But no, we just had this podcast ending, and it was pretty worse for me, mate, because you listened to all the episodes as a part of, like, your research, and you relayed the information for me. I never listened to them, so I had no pre-existing connection to these characters, Grace and Anton. So I don't know, they came across a little, like, frustrating and, annoying to me at times, especially like Grace's enthusiasm, because I just had no prior connection, and it just went on for way too long. And like you say, I'm not expecting them to rip Until Dawn off. I don't expect to have Emma crying on like the police tape, and Nick there like saying what happened in front of the police. but it would have felt nice to have some form of conclusion, because, for example, Nick got none of that. Nick woke up in the woods, Emma stayed in the basement, and Jacob had a cry. It would have been nice to have just got one more thing, I think. So, and I was almost waiting for it the whole time. I was waiting for a cutscene or just a final interview, and I never had that. So it just was a very underwhelming conclusion. And at the time, I was like, oh, maybe I've missed a trick. I'll let it stew, and then, maybe, my thoughts will process differently, and then I'll learn to accept it. But a month's gone by, and I don't really think I have. I think I'm still kind of, thinking about it, and I definitely think the quality of the Quarry drops massively in the final 3 chapters after the flashback chapter. Just a lot of the decision making, the writing, I just felt underwhelmed by it. And don't get me wrong, this is a fantastic game, and there are great endings out there. It's just not all of them are. And I do think the game lacks polish in certain areas. And obviously, yeah, we'll talk more about our final thoughts in a separate chapter if we do comparisons and stuff. But yeah, very mixed, game for me. Great game, but very mixed ending, I would say, Jack.
Yes, I think so. I've enjoyed going back to see all the various paths and all the various different things that can happen. Even as I was playing my first playthrough, it's interesting you say about post Chapter 7, because for me, post Chapter 7, something definitely did change. I put it down to the fact that it felt a little bit more like a movie, like it was more cutscene heavy. I just think that the stakes for me were never that high. I really liked the werewolf as a villain, and I thought it was done quite well. Do I think it's as good as the Wendigo? I don't know, I'm still pondering on that, to be honest. It needed a little bit more. You think of Until Dawn, like you've got the hide sequences, the Wendigo screaming into the camera, the Wendigo on the chandelier, it's very quick. And you know what? As I'm sort of coming on to this point, it can touch on something that we forgot to mention. The different ending locations. Now, I thought this was going to work in such a way that different characters could actually end up in different locations. So like Caitlin could have ended up at Hackett House. Ryan could have ended up at the lodge. That's what I thought it was going to be. But it didn't pan out that way. It was literally that the characters were split up and they all had their own ending at a certain location. Me personally, I actually was a bit ambivalent towards it. It didn't strike a chord with me. I think Until Dawn did it better.
Yeah, interesting, because I like you thought that maybe I'm asking for too much, but I as well thought that you could have maybe Caitlin's at the lodge, maybe she's on the island, just different things like that. And certainly we were maybe slightly missold. Maybe that was some kind of grand marketing scheme to get the sales up on pre-order. I really don't know. But yeah, and don't get me wrong, it's a step up from Until Dawn, where, you've got Matt and Jess in the mines, and then you've got everyone else in the lodge, where there's just 2 locations and characters can never switch. We managed, you've got Max on the island, you've got Nick and Jacob in the forest, although that's not really an ending. And then you've got, the burnt down circus versus the main cabin. So it's a step up. So, I'll take that, from Until Dawn. But yeah, I guess it was slightly misadvertised, and, maybe we're just expecting too much, but I reckon one out there could probably argue that it's borderline fraud, mate. But, I wouldn't say it was that extreme, but you could say that is a case for that.
You know what would have made it better? And again, it comes back to this whole cutscene. If everyone had their own ending at their own location, but then there was a cutscene where the survivors came together, then I'd have been alright with it. But the fact that each group or each person is just isolated in their own place, it cuts to black, and then it comes up with a sentence saying so-and-so died, so-and-so woke up in the forest, and this and that. It felt very disconnected. The group, I feel like they needed to bring people together at the end
It did. The pacing was all over the shop because it rushes you into the wolves. It's really a full-on game. Then it goes to chapter 7, which slows it right down, and then chapter 8 tries to pace it up again, and then it almost just concludes like rapidly. Like you're playing the game, and then it's like, oh, by the way, it's over now. And I just felt like back and forth. I just felt like I was running on a treadmill and someone's messing with the buttons, and I didn't know whether to run or walk. And yeah, I don't know. That's just the impression I got from it. And I know that I've been very cynical this episode, right? And I don't want people to think I hate this game. I just think our job, Jack, is to kind of, nitpick at things, right? And find the flaws and the plot holes, the things that I didn't like, because you guys don't want us to just praise the game for 1 hour. Like, who wants to watch me just going, oh yeah, they were great. I love this person, and I love that person did that. No one wants to see that. You guys are here to sort of see our criticisms and what we didn't enjoy. And I definitely think that this isn't a perfect game. It missed a lot of tricks. The pacing, wasn't often great. And like I say, my main conclusion, it heavily relies on you wanting to infect people. And if you don't do that, then you can get very underwhelming endings. And that's just not necessarily clear that's what you're supposed to do. And it doesn't really make sense that the best quality endings should happen from that, where you potentially have to make a mistake or a fail or a death here and there to get the best endings in the game. Obviously criticize me, guys, if I'm, wrong there. Maybe I'm just being really salty. I don't know. But either way, I'm pretty happy to wrap things up. We'll end up doing more videos about our final thoughts and conclusions. But in terms of chapter 10, mate, I think I'm pretty much all out of points there. I don't know about yourself.
No, I am as well. And to be honest, I think that makes two of us in terms of like the cynical / underwhelming part of this video. It's not like we're being negative for negative's sake, is it? We're just expressing our honest opinion on how we felt the game played out. If we got different endings, it could have been completely different. But hey, yeah, that's how it is. And obviously I have seen other endings, and they are good. Like, they're certainly better than what I had initially anyway. But this has been primarily, we've been talking about our initial playthrough on this series, so that's just the way cookie crumbles.
It is, and it definitely was a great game that I really enjoyed playing. It's just, like I say, we've got to pick up the flaws. But we hope you guys really enjoyed this series of the Quarry. It's not fully over. We'll be doing way more Quarry analysis. We'll be doing discussions and stuff. Thank you to every one of you who's been commenting along the way, watching the channel, supporting us. We've gained a lot of new, friends and, fans along the way while we're doing this Quarry journey, and I very much have enjoyed doing this deep dive. I'm going to quite miss, covering our deep dive analysis on the Quarry, Jack. Have you enjoyed the ride?
Of course I have, and it's been a really good period, isn't it? Because we've done Until Dawn, and then we've done the successor to Until Dawn, the Quarry, and I really like doing these chapter by chapter deep dives. And just to echo what you said, like it's really good to see, like, when you guys comment your opinions. There are some regulars that we get now that they comment every video, and it's always really nice just to have a bit of a chin wag with you on various things that we've discussed and stuff. So definitely keep doing that. But I think, mate, to ease the pain, we can look forward to Telltale's The Walking Dead, can't we? As to be our future game that we're gonna talk about and analyse and reflect on and all that jazz. So yeah,
that's it. Very nostalgic game for us. Obviously, we know a lot of you will be Supermassive Games fans, and this isn't something if that's not something you're interested in, you can find us again for when we do The Devil in Me, because that's around the corner in potentially October, November, we reckon. So, you guys can find us again for that. But otherwise, we're going to do something a bit different. Hopefully, a lot of you are Telltale fans, and if not, hopefully you can learn to be. The Walking Dead game, it's an absolute brilliant game. So yeah, we hope you guys enjoy the journey along with us as we look to cover Lee and Clementine's story. But from my end, thank you very much for joining us, guys, for another series of our deep dive analysis, chapter by chapter. It's been an absolute pleasure to cover the Quarry for you all. And for myself, we'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much for joining us and listening to the Butterfly Effect podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for joining, guys. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, guys. Take it away, Emma.
As soon as you get home, sub, share, smash that like button. The Holy Trinity.